An American millionaire found a homeless girl on a street in the UK and decided to marry her, never imagining he would spoil her endlessly. London's dim streets were drenched by relentless rain, while a cold wind swept through the alleys, mixing the smell of wet pavement with a sense of hopelessness. Beneath the flickering light of a broken street lamp, Eleanor pressed herself against the wall, her thin coat barely shielding her from the freezing night. Her fingers, numb and stiff, gripped the worn cuffs of her sleeves as she shivered uncontrollably. She had been living on the streets for far too long. Hunger was a familiar companion, and the harsh neglect of passers-by no longer shocked her. But the cold was different. It gnawed at her bones, a cruel torment that made her limbs heavy and her mind sluggish. Nearby, the warm glow from a convenience store spilled onto the pavement. Eleanor's empty stomach twisted painfully as she gazed at the food inside, but she dared not enter. She had learned her lesson. Yet, the biting wind pushed her forward until she stood just outside the door, hoping for a brief respite from the storm. The store owner, a burly man with a thick accent, noticed her immediately. His eyes hardened. "Hey, get away from my store," he barked, stepping forward aggressively. Eleanor flinched but stayed put. "Please, I just need a little warmth," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "I don't care. You're scaring my customers. Leave." He shoved her shoulder, forcing her back into the rain. Her feet slipped on the slick pavement, and she stumbled, catching herself on a metal post. The brief hope vanished, leaving only exhaustion. She swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Tears wouldn't help now. The sound of an expensive engine broke through the storm. A sleek black Rolls-Royce stopped a few feet away. Eleanor barely noticed. Rich men in fancy cars passed by her all the time. But this one was different. The tinted window rolled down, revealing a man in his early 30s with sharp features and piercing blue eyes. He wore a tailored black suit, his dark hair neatly styled, but his expression was unlike the usual indifference of the wealthy. He was watching her, studying her. A long silence passed before he spoke. "Do you need help?" His deep, steady voice cut through the storm's chaos. Eleanor's instinct screamed at her to run, to refuse, to reject his offer before he could change his mind. She knew the world's rules. Nothing was free. I don't want your pity," she said, lifting her chin despite trembling. His gaze didn't falter. "It's not pity, just an offer." She hesitated. The wind whipped at her soaked clothes. The cold was unbearable. She was so tired. The chauffeur leaned forward and whispered something to the man. He nodded and turned back to her. "Get in," he said simply. Eleanor shook her head, knees weak. "I don't know you." A sudden dizziness overwhelmed her. Her vision blurred, and the last thing she saw was a man's concerned face before darkness took her. James Anderson acted without hesitation. The moment Eleanor collapsed, he was out of the car, reaching her before his driver could react. Rain soaked his expensive suit as he knelt beside her, checking her pulse. It was weak. "She's freezing," he muttered, lifting her effortlessly into his arms. His chauffeur hesitated. "Sir?" Taking in a homeless woman. "I don't care," James interrupted. "She needs help." He carried her into the Rolls-Royce, ignoring the puzzled looks of onlookers. The shopkeeper who had thrown Eleanor out watched in stunned silence as the wealthy American businessman, one of the most powerful figures in finance, drove away with a half-conscious homeless girl. Warmth, softness, the scent of fresh linen, and a faint citrus note greeted Eleanor as her eyes fluttered open, her body tensing. The ceiling above was not the gray sky she knew, but high and adorned with intricate moldings. She sat up quickly, heart racing. This was no cold, hard pavement. Her fingers clutched the plush comforter beneath her. The bed was huge, the sheets smooth and luxurious. A large window overlooked the city skyline, morning light filtering through sheer curtains. It was a hotel room, but not just any hotel. This was luxury. Panic gripped her chest. How had she come here? Then she remembered the man, the car, the cold. She had passed out, and he must have brought her here. The suite door creaked open. Eleanor turned sharply, muscles coiled like a cornered animal. James Anderson entered, looking impeccably composed despite his damp hair, as if freshly showered. He wore a crisp white shirt with sleeves rolled up, his expensive watch catching the soft light. In his hands was a tray of food. "You're awake," he said simply, placing the tray on the bedside table. His calm voice was steady, but his eyes carefully assessed her condition. Eleanor shifted, pulling the blanket closer around herself. "Where am I?" Her voice was hoarse and weak. "A hotel," James replied, pulling a chair closer and sitting down. "You passed out last night. I couldn't just leave you out there in the rain." Eleanor narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "And why should I believe that? Maybe you want something from me." James exhaled calmly, unfazed by her hostility. "Eat first," he said, nodding toward the tray. "Then if you still think I have some hidden motive, you can walk out that door and never see me again." She glanced at the tray, cautiously scrambled eggs, toast, fruit, and a steaming cup of tea. The aroma made her stomach ache, but her pride held her back. "I'm not hungry," she muttered. James leaned forward, resting his forearms on his knees. "I understand. When you've been disappointed enough times, you start to believe kindness doesn't exist." Eleanor flinched. His words struck too close to home. He didn't press further. Instead, he lifted the cup of tea and held out to her. "At least take this. You need warmth more than pride right now." After a moment's hesitation, she sighed and reached for the cup. The heat seeped into her fingers, easing the stiffness. She took a careful sip, feeling the warmth spread down her throat. James watched her silently before asking, "What's your name?" She hesitated. "Eleanor. Just Eleanor." She looked away. "Just Eleanor," he repeated softly. After a pause, he said, "You don't belong on the streets." Eleanor scoffed. "That obvious?" "You're educated," he observed. "Your accent, your posture." "You weren't always homeless," he added. Her grip on the cup tightened. "Doesn't matter. This is my life now." "But wasn't always," he countered gently. "What happened?" Her jaw clenched. She didn't owe him anything, but the words spilled out anyway. "I used to be at university," she admitted, "studying business." James raised an eyebrow. "Smart girl." She let out a humorless laugh. "Not smart enough." His expression softened. "What changed?" She swallowed hard, staring into the dark liquid in her cup. "My father, he was a businessman. We were doing okay, not rich, but comfortable. Then everything fell apart. His company went bankrupt. My mother got sick. Debt piled up. Then he died." James was silent. Eleanor clenched her fists. "After that, everything collapsed. We lost our home. My mother couldn't handle it. She passed away a year later. And I couldn't keep up with school. No money, no family, nowhere to go." A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Eleanor whispered, "Richard Calloway." The name jolted James. He knew it well. A decade ago, Richard Calloway had been a respected entrepreneur in the UK, known for his innovative business strategies. James had met him once briefly at a conference when he was a young investor. But Calloway's company had collapsed, suddenly rumors of a hostile takeover, financial sabotage. James had heard about his death, but never knew he had a daughter. He looked at Eleanor differently now. She wasn't just a homeless girl. She was a fallen heiress of a ruined empire, and she had no idea that the man sitting across from her might have played a part in her father's downfall. Eleanor sat stiffly on the edge of the hotel bed, clutching the warm teacup as if it grounded her. James leaned back in his chair, watching her with an unreadable expression. After a long pause, he said, "Come to America with me." Her head snapped up. "What?" "I can help you get back on your feet," James said calmly, as if offering to change someone's life was no big deal. "A fresh start, a job, a place to live. You don't belong here not like this." Her stomach twisted. I can't just go to another country with a stranger." James smirked slightly. "I'm not asking you to marry me or take a blind chance." Eleanor exhaled, shaking her head. "I appreciate what you've done, but I don't need charity." James raised an eyebrow. "Really? And what's your grand plan? Stay here? Hope someone drops coins in your cup? Keep sleeping on the streets until winter wins?" Her fingers clenched the cup. His words stung because they were true. She had no plan, no future. James leaned forward, elbows on knees. This isn't charity. It's an opportunity. I have a company in New York. I can get you a job. Not a handout. A job. You can earn your way back. Her throat tightened. Why are you doing this? For a moment, an emotion flickered across his face, something she couldn't place. Let's just say I know what it's like to lose everything, he said quietly. Silence fell. Eleanor wanted to say no, to hold on to her pride and reject being another billionaire's charity case. But the truth was harsh. She had nothing. No home, no future, no one left who cared. Finally, she exhaled shakily. What kind of job? James smiled slowly. We'll figure that out once we get there. The private jet landed smoothly at Teterboro Airport, far from the rain-soaked streets of London where Eleanor had last stood. As she stepped off the plane, the weight of what she had done hit her. She had left everything behind the little she had and placed her future in the hands of a man she barely knew. James walked beside her to a waiting black SUV. Nervous? He asked, glancing at her. She forced a smirk. Just wondering if you secretly plan to sell me on the black market. James laughed. You have a dark sense of humor. It's all I've got left, she muttered. As the car drove through Manhattan's towering skyline, Eleanor stared out the window, overwhelmed by the stark contrast between his world and the one she had left. James's apartment, his penthouse, was like something out of a movie. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city, sleek modern furniture arranged like a luxury showroom. It was pristine, controlled just like its owner. You'll stay here until you settle in, James said, placing her single bag near the guest bedroom. There's a walk-in closet, a bathroom, anything you need. Eleanor hesitated in the doorway. This is temporary. James nodded. Of course. But they both knew she had no idea how long temporary would last. The following weeks were a whirlwind. True to his word, James didn't give Eleanor an easy way out. He made her work for it. She started as an assistant at Anderson Enterprises, handling documents, organizing schedules, running errands. The workload was intense, but she didn't complain. She was earning money, rebuilding her life piece by piece. James kept his distance at work, treating her like any other employee. But outside the office, he gently encouraged her healing. He made sure she ate well, had clothes that fit, and even enrolled her in night classes to finish her degree. At first, Eleanor resisted, but slowly, reluctantly, she began to trust that he wasn't just playing some long game of pity. Then the rumors started. Whispers among staff, side glances, hushed conversations. Soon, the gossip spread beyond the office. Did you hear? Anderson picked up some homeless girl. She's obviously using him. Gold digger. But she's just waiting to marry him and take half. The tabloids caught wind. A headline in a business magazine read, Billionaire James Anderson and his mysterious charity case. Who is she? Eleanor saw the article on a co-worker's phone, her stomach dropping. It included a photo of her walking beside James outside his penthouse. The article painted her as an opportunist, a woman who had strategically found a billionaire benefactor. She stormed into James's office, slamming the magazine on his desk. Did you see this? James barely looked up. Yes, that's it. Yes, she snapped. He sighed, leaning back. They'll talk. Let them, Eleanor said, chest tight. You don't understand. James interrupted, locking eyes with her. I know exactly what they think. But do you? Do you really care about their opinions? She froze, caught off guard. His voice softened. You don't owe them any explanations, Eleanor. You know who you are. I know who you are. That's all that matters. Though his words should have comforted her, Eleanor felt something unsettling. She had spent years fighting alone, pushing everyone away to prove she didn't need anyone. Yet now, for the first time in a long while, she longed to be someone worthy of belief. The rumors only intensified. Every morning at Anderson Enterprises, heads turned and whispers followed her. No matter how hard she worked or how late she stayed, people had already made up their minds. The headlines grew crueler. James Anderson falls for street girl, billionaire's blind spot, gold digger, or Cinderella. The truth behind Anderson's mystery woman. Eleanor tried to ignore it, But the gossip was everywhere in business, news, gossip blogs, and social media, where strangers dissected her every move. One afternoon, while organizing files in James's office, she overheard his assistant Mark on the phone outside. "No, Mr. Anderson will not comment on baseless rumors. Eleanor Calloway is an employee. Any other claims are unfounded." Her stomach tightened. It wasn't just the press. Even James's own team doubted her. Taking a deep breath, she entered James's office. He was scanning reports, but softened when he saw her. "You saw the latest article?" he asked. She crossed her arms. "They think I'm using you, that I'm waiting to marry you and take half your company." James smirked. "They clearly underestimate how good my lawyers are." Eleanor didn't laugh. "This is a joke, James." He sighed, setting his papers aside. "It's nonsense. I don't care what they say." "Well, I do," she snapped. James studied her carefully. "Why?" She hesitated. "Why does it bother me so much? Why does it twist my stomach to see people dismiss everything I'm trying to rebuild?" He stood and approached her, voice calm but firm. "You don't have to prove anything to them. You're here because you're capable, not because I'm some knight in shining armor." Her throat tightened. "But what if they're right?" James frowned. "What? What if, deep down, I am relying on you? What if I'm just a charity case you took pity on?" A long silence followed before James spoke quietly. "Is that what you think of yourself?" Her breath caught. He ran a hand through his hair. "I can stand before 100 cameras and tell them you're not a gold digger, but until you believe it yourself, none of it matters." His words struck deeper than any headline. From that day, Eleanor threw herself into her work, determined to silence her doubts. James kept his promise, treating her like any other employee. But outside the office, he was different. He challenged her. One evening, walking through Central Park, he asked, "What do you really want, Eleanor?" She hesitated. "I don't know." James smirked. "Yes, you do. You're just afraid to say it." She huffed. "Fine. I want to go back to school. Finish my business degree." He nodded, as if it was the most natural thing. "Then do it." She blinked. "It's not that simple." "It is," he interrupted. "You're smart, capable, and you have every right to be in that world." For the first time in years, someone wasn't just offering help, they were reminding her who she was. Slowly, something shifted inside her. At first, it was small things, the way James's hand lingered when passing her a document, the softness in his eyes, how he remembered the tiniest details, how she took her coffee, how she hated the cold, how she hummed when focused. Then one night, it became more. James had taken her to a gallery, a high-profile charity event filled with men in tuxedos discussing fortunes they didn't need. Eleanor felt out of place, but James whispered, "You belong here more than any of them." He stayed by her side all night. When the event ended, instead of going home, he took her to a quiet rooftop overlooking the city's sparkling skyline. Eleanor turned to him, heart tightening at the way he looked at her, not like a savior, but like a man truly seeing her for the first time. Maybe this wasn't just gratitude. Maybe it was something more. She wanted to say, "I think I'm falling for you," but a cold voice whispered doubts. What if he only sees you as someone to fix? What if he's just playing the savior? What if, once you're whole, he won't need you anymore? The fear paralyzed her. She forced a smile and looked away. "It's late. We should go." James studied her, sensing the unspoken, but didn't press. "Yeah, let's go." As they walked inside, Eleanor tried to ignore the ache in her chest. She was falling for him, and it terrified her. Months passed in a blur, drawing them closer in ways neither fully admitted. Eleanor had settled into life in New York, not just surviving, but living. She re-enrolled in business school, attending evening classes after work. She climbed from assistant to junior strategist, earning her place through hard work, not favoritism. The biggest change was James. He was no longer just a man who saved her. He was her constant, the person she debated with over morning coffee, who challenged her to be better, who looked at her as if she were extraordinary. She loved him. She hadn't said it aloud, but it was there in the quickening of her pulse when he entered the room, in her seeking his approval, in the way she felt she belonged when with him. But a voice in her mind whispered, "You're still the girl he saved." What happens when he no longer needs to save you? That was why. When James knelt on one knee, Eleanor's world tilted. It was an autumn night, the crisp air scented with fallen leaves. James had brought her to his private estate outside the city, a rarely visited sanctuary. They sat on a wooden bench overlooking the lake, wrapped in silence beneath a star-filled sky. James turned to her, expression unreadable. "Eleanor." His voice was steady, but his fingers clenched as if holding back something immense. She smiled at him. After a long pause, he moved. Before she could react, James was kneeling, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Her breath caught. "Marry me." Two simple words that sent shockwaves through her soul. Eleanor's heart pounded as she stared at him. "James, what?" He opened the box, revealing a ring. It wasn't a huge, flashy ring like a billionaire might pick, but modest, refined diamond, simple yet stunning. It was flawless. James exhaled quietly. "I don't need to recite a long speech because you already know how much you mean to me." Eleanor's chest tightened painfully. "Eleanor, I don't care about your past, where you came from, or what others say. What matters to me is who you are. It's the way you challenge me and make me feel alive. The way you make me feel like the luckiest man every time you enter a room." Eleanor's eyes welled up. "James." His fingers gripped the ring box tighter. "I want to spend my life with you. Not because I rescued you or want to fix you, but because I love you. And I believe, no, I know you love me too." His words crashed over her like a tidal wave. She did. God, she did. But she couldn't say yes, not because she didn't want to, but because she was scared. James Anderson was a billionaire, a man who could have any woman he desired. Powerful, brilliant, untouchable. And she was just her. She wasn't whole yet. She was enough. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "I can't." James froze. "What?" Eleanor forced herself to meet his gaze, though it felt like tearing out her own heart. "James, this is too much. I don't." Her voice broke. James remained still, unreadable. "You don't love me?" "No. I mean, yes, I do, but that's the problem." She choked on her words. "I love you so deeply it scares me. And I can't. I can't be the woman you need me to be." "Who says you're not?" His tone was calm but raw underneath. Eleanor took a shaky breath. "I don't want to be someone you had to save, James. I don't want to be your project." Something flickered and his eyes hurt, deep and genuine. Slowly, he closed the ring box. Eleanor expected anger, argument, a fight to convince her she was wrong. But he didn't say a word. Instead, he quietly said, "I'll wait for you, no matter how long it takes." Her breath caught. James stood, slipping the ring back into his pocket. "You don't have to say yes now, but one day you will." There was no arrogance, no pressure, just steady, quiet certainty. Eleanor's heart shattered because deep down, she wanted to believe he was right. But right now, she wasn't ready to take that leap. So she turned away, knowing if she stayed, she might break completely. That night, Eleanor walked away from James, but not from everything he had given her. His words, "I'll wait for you, however long it takes," echoed in her mind for weeks, haunting, comforting, terrifying. She knew she loved him, but she also knew if she said yes now, a part of her would always wonder if she had truly earned her place beside him. So she made a choice. She would prove to herself, not to him, that she could stand on her own. Eleanor threw herself into work and school with renewed determination. She moved out of James's penthouse, finding a modest apartment in Brooklyn. Nothing fancy, but it was hers. She took a second job at a small consulting firm, working tirelessly to build experience beyond Anderson Enterprises. Her days started early and ended late mornings at the firm, afternoons in class, nights buried in textbooks. It was exhausting, but for the first time in years, she felt like she was creating something truly her own. James never tried to stop her. He didn't beg her to stay, didn't show up unexpectedly, didn't make grand gestures to win her back. Instead, he watched from afar. Occasionally, small reminders reached her, a book she'd mentioned, anonymously delivered, a recommendation letter she hadn't asked for but desperately needed, a brief text. Proud of you. He never tried to control her journey. He simply let her take it. And that, more than anything, deepened her love for him. Months passed and Eleanor flourished. She graduated top of her class and secured a position at one of New York's most prestigious firms. She worked harder than ever, determined to prove she wasn't just some billionaire's former charity case. But success came with a cost. She stopped seeing James, burying herself in work so completely there was no room for anything else. She told herself it was necessary that she was finally independent. Then one evening, at a rooftop party surrounded by strangers, holding a glass of champagne she didn't want, she realized something. James would have hated this. That's when it hit her. She had spent so long proving she didn't need James that she forgot to ask herself what she truly wanted. And what she wanted was him. Not because he saved her, not because he gave her a second chance, but because from the start, he saw her not as broken, but as someone worth waiting for. Eleanor wasn't his project. She was his choice. And now it was time for her to choose him. A year after walking away, after building a life that was truly hers, after a year without seeing him, Eleanor had everything she once thought impossible. A thriving career, financial stability, respect. In her field, she had proven beyond doubt she could stand alone. Yet none of it felt complete without him. James kept his promise. He never chased her, never interfered. But he never moved on. She saw it in his rare interviews. When questioned about his personal life, he brushed it off, but his eyes betrayed an unspoken truth. He was waiting, and now Eleanor was ready. So she did what she should have done long ago. She went back to him. James was in his penthouse, the same one she once called home, though it now felt unfamiliar. She expected drama, anger, rejection. But when the housekeeper let her in and she stepped into his office, James didn't look surprised. He looked at her as he always had, as if she were the most important person in the room. His voice was calm, steady. "You're back." Eleanor swallowed hard. "I am." A heavy silence hung between them. James didn't press for reasons or explanations. He simply waited, because that's what he always did, waiting for her to be ready. Eleanor stepped forward and reached into her bag. Her fingers closed around a small velvet box. Her heart raced. "Marry me." For the first time in their entire relationship, James Anderson was at a loss for words. She took a deep breath and forced herself to continue. "Last time, I said no because I believed I was enough. Because I was scared. I thought you saw me as someone broken to fix. But now I understand. I was never your project. I was never someone you pitied. I was someone you chose." Her voice wavered slightly. "So now I'm choosing you." James exhaled slowly, his blue eyes dark and unreadable. "Eleanor, I love you," he whispered. "Not because you needed saving, not because I need you, but because no matter how far I ran, I never stopped wanting you." She opened the box. Inside was a ring not extravagant or flashy, just simple, sincere, and real, just like their love. James stared at her for a long moment. Then a slow smile spread across his face. "Took you long enough." Eleanor let out a shaky laugh. "So is that a yes?" James didn't answer with words. Instead, he pulled her into his arms and kissed her like he had been waiting forever. And maybe he had. The wedding was breathtaking. An American millionaire had taken a homeless girl from the streets of the UK to be his wife, never imagining he would cherish her endlessly. Held at a private vineyard in Napa Valley, it wasn't a grandiose event filled with hundreds of guests or excessive luxury. It was intimate, meaningful, and perfect, just like them. Those who mattered were their James's closest friends, Eleanor's co-workers, and a few former professors who had believed in her even when she hadn't believed in herself. Even Mark, James's usually stern assistant, cracked a rare smile while adjusting his tie. When Eleanor walked down the aisle, she was no longer the girl James had found shivering on London's streets. She was strong, confident, radiant. A woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece. A woman who had fought her way back to the life she deserved. A woman who had finally allowed herself to love and be loved in return. James stood at the altar, his blue eyes locked on her, filled with nothing but pride and adoration. When she reached him, he took her hands gently, "Took you long enough," he murmured, teasing her with the same words he had said when she proposed. Eleanor smiled, her heart full. "Worth the wait." James's gaze softened. "More than you'll ever know." Their vows were simple, yet deeply personal. James promised to always challenge her and believe in her, even when she doubted herself. Eleanor promised never to run again, never let fear hold her back from the happiness they both deserved. When they said, "I do," the vineyard erupted in applause. But to Eleanor, the only thing that mattered was how James looked at her, as if she were the best decision he had ever made. And maybe she was. Marriage didn't magically make life perfect. They still argued, still had moments of stubbornness, and there were days when Eleanor had to remind James to take a break and eat. But their love was never about perfection. It was about partnership. James never saved Eleanor. He simply stood beside her until she was strong enough to save herself. And now, for the rest of their lives, they would stand together as equals, as partners, two souls who had finally found their way home. Eleanor and James's story wasn't about a billionaire rescuing a homeless girl. It was a story of resilience, love, and discovering one's worth. Eleanor didn't need saving. She needed someone to believe in her until she could believe in herself again. And James? He didn't just find a woman to love. He found an equal, a partner. A love built not on pity, but on mutual respect and unwavering devotion. Their journey wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that's what made it beautiful. If this story touched your heart, please share, and subscribe to Soul Stirring Story for more emotional, life-changing tales. Because sometimes one story can heal a soul, inspire a heart, and remind us all the power of love and perseverance. See you in the next story.